I am obsessed with the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Now, this is Anne of Cleves, and this is the famous painter Hans Holbein the Younger. And this is Hans Holbein the Younger's painting of Anne of Cleves. And it's a very famous painting because it's said that when the painting was delivered to Henry VIII, he immediately fell in love with Anne because he found Anne so stunningly beautiful. Now let's give a little backstory first. Henry was originally married to Catherine of Aragon, who was a princess of Spain, but she had been married to his brother Arthur beforehand, but Arthur was very sickly and died. Now, they said he shouldn't marry his brother's wife, but he married her. And then when she couldn't have a baby, he got angry at her and he exiled her and he got sick of her and she was so depressed. But there was no getting Henry back because he'd already fallen in love with a young lady at court, a young lady named Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne Boleyn was a smart cookie. Now, Henry was really into marrying Anne because he was trying to have an heir to the throne. He still didn't have a male heir. With his first wife, Catherine, he'd had Mary, but he still didn't have a male heir. So everything was on Anne to have a male heir, but she didn't have a male heir. She gave birth to the greatest queen England ever had, but Henry wouldn't know that. And Henry was pissed because he dated her for like 11 years before he even had sex with her. So he was pissed because now he was older and he was convinced that she had bewitched him, because how on earth could he fall in love with a woman that he hadn't even had sex with? And then, wow, he was so mad. So he just chopped off her head. He was just not having it. But don't worry, because Henry wasn't going to waste a minute. Even though he had just killed his second wife, he had already found another young lady named Jane Seymour, and Jane gave him the heir he always wanted, but she died in childbirth. And when the queen dies in childbirth, nobody's happy because, well, they're probably going to get killed by the king next, especially since she's the one who gave him the heir. So that brings us to Anne of Cleves, because now Henry was single and he was ready to mingle. So he told his friend Hans, go paint me a picture of this lady Anne. I heard she's hot. And you know what? Go paint a picture of her sister too while you're at it. Anne had a sister named Amalia. So Hans went, because that was his job, and he painted his painting of Anne and brought it back to Henry. But when Henry saw the real Anne, he wasn't impressed. It didn't look like the painting. And he freaked out, because now he was married, and he didn't like her. He thought she looked like a horse. He was so sad. What's wrong, my lord? You look like a horse. Now you think Anne would have been upset that her husband thought she looked like a horse, but at least he was honest, and she was just trying to get out of there alive. So she just told Henry, she was like, look, I'll just go. You want me to leave? I'll just get out of here. And he was like, what? You'll just leave and you won't take my money or my kingdom? And she was like, no, I'll just leave, I'll just go and be a horse somewhere else. And he was like, really? And then he cried tears of joy. He was like, you know what? Out of all my wives, you might look like a horse, but you're the most beautiful one so far. You're just like the most stress-free, beautiful horse of a wife. I can't thank you enough. No problem. Where do I go? How do I get out of here? How do I get out of here with my horse head intact? Don't go so fast, my sister. He saw her as a sister now, and he lavished her with homes and land and riches beyond her dreams. And for the rest of her life, Anne was friends with the king, one of his closest advisors, and outlived all of his wives. And her sister outlived her. All of the wealth that her sister inherited from the king went to Amala, and she, the unmarried sister, she never married anyone, wound up living the happiest everest after. And Henry, well, of course, he married again, and his next wife lost her head. And all of this makes total sense, except for one thing. How did the painting of Anne of Cleves come out so good if she looked like a horse in real life? And there was only one explanation that crossed people's mind. It must have been that Hans Holbein the younger was in love with Anne, and he painted her the way he saw her, which is why when Henry saw the painting, he fell in love, because he saw Anne the way Hans saw Anne. Luckily for Anne, Henry was incapable of loving her, because the women he loved always lost their heads.